Mystery has a stubborn way of refusing to be politely filed under the heading Solved, even in an age when pocket computers can summon a taxi and tell you the weather on Mars. Netflix tried to wrestle with that stubbornness in Files of the Unexplained, a documentary-style series that curates real-life puzzles with all the dramatic flair of late-night coffee table conversation. The first episode to snag viewer attention focuses on the Pascagoula incident, a strange night in October 1973 when two fishermen claimed an encounter with non-human beings that sounded at once like the product of fevered imagination and a story you half hoped was true.
Before we get into it, and if you like getting spooked in your slippers, subscribe to our channel, because nothing says modern fandom like backing content that makes you peek across the pond and wonder who's watching.
Human curiosity about strange lights in the sky probably predates campfires, but modern fascination took on new urgency with the rise of space travel, Hollywood sci-fi. Pascagoula, Mississippi was the kind of place where a mysterious light would be noticed. In the early 1970s, the town was changing. A shipyard producing destroyers had injected jobs and modern noise into a once quiet fishing village. New faces came, including two men who would become central to an enduring story, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. They were ordinary blue-collar and fond of fishing. Those facts matter because they make a tale seem less Hollywood and more like small town. Life Interrupted, which is an appealing blend for anyone who likes a good, unsettling yarn. On the evening of October 11, 1973, Charles and Calvin took to the Pascagoula River near a drawbridge, rod and bait in hand, like men who preferred predictable fish to unpredictable headlines. According to their accounts, the air carried a subtle electric buzz before anything visual registered. Charles later described a zipping sound about 60 to 70 feet away, and then a blinding, otherworldly light. The scenario escalated fast. A craft, as they described it, seemed to lower and reveal itself, and three entities emerged, floating in a manner that struck witnesses as odd because the beings did not touch the ground. Two came for Charles, one for Calvin, and both men reported being paralyzed, unable to run, as if held by hypnosis. They say they were taken inside the craft, which they compared to being inside a light bulb, a description that prompts both curiosity and the mental image of a very bright interior design choice. Inside this vessel, Charles recounted, an apparatus resembling a large eye rose from the wall and examined him thoroughly. It is the kind of detail that makes skeptics roll their eyes and believers clutch their proverbial pearls with equal fervor. After a period that to them felt like a real experience, both men were returned to the shoreline where they found themselves disoriented and staring at a craft that departed in a flash of powerful blue light. The story reads like a chapter from a pulp magazine, yet it was filed as a real-world report, offered not with theatrical embellishment, but with the tremulous sincerity of two men who insisted they had witnessed something extraordinary. News of the incident spread faster than a dockside rumor. The fishermen went to the authorities, and soon the small town of Pascagoula had something to talk about besides shipyard schedules and fishing conditions. Local reaction ran the gamut from fearful curiosity to outright panic, with calls flooding the sheriff's department. National media joined the conversation, turning the pair into fixtures of nightly speculation. Some outlets gave the visitors a nickname that stuck, the Clawmen, which had the unfortunate effect of making the situation sound like a B-movie with a catchy trailer. For Charles and Calvin, however, there was nothing jaunty about it. Calvin in particular spoke of prolonged trauma, and their lives, they said, were never quite the same. When a story this odd hits the public sphere, witnesses and evidence become the currency of credibility. And here, the Pascagoula case got complicated. The drawbridge near where the men were fishing was tended around the clock, and at the time, two bridge tenders were on duty with a clear view of the river. They reported seeing nothing. That absence of corroboration by those ideally located to notice is a big hole in the narrative, especially for those who like their mysteries accompanied by physical proof. Yet, other locals did come forward with reports of strange blue lights that evening. One man, leaving his car at dusk, described powerful LED-like lights on the riverbank. A woman in her backyard said she watched blue lights moving. These testimonies added texture, but they fell short of a photograph, a piece of wreckage, or any other hard evidence you can pin to a bulletin board. Questions about the men themselves compounded skepticism. Charles reportedly refused a polygraph test, a decision that prompted some observers to ask why. Critics also accused both men of profiting from media appearances and interviews, suggesting that financial incentive might have colored their recounting. Charles was alleged to have made significant earnings from the story, which inevitably fed the narrative that fame and money could be more motivating than truth. Supporters countered that any money was compensation for time lost and the stress of constant public scrutiny. Private tape recordings exist from when the men were alone, and those who had hoped to catch them contradicting themselves claimed the tapes showed consistent accounts, which complicates the argument either way. Skeptics have offered a variety of alternative explanations, because where a fantastical claim appears, rational alternatives will follow. One possibility is simple fabrication, a sensational story crafted for attention. Another is alcohol or a waking dream state, a not implausible suggestion when two men, at night and by the river, report an experience that could be consistent with hallucination. Given the Cold War context, an additional proposition is that the men witnessed a secret military experiment or aircraft that looked and behaved in ways unfamiliar to civilians. After all, military tests in the 1970s could have involved new lighting or hovering craft, and secrecy would have kept official channels quiet. The mixture of explanations reveals less about what happened and more about how human beings try to make sense of the inexplicable. As the decades passed, the Pascagoula episode settled into folklore. In 2019, a historical marker was unveiled near the alleged site, an odd blend of local pride and ongoing bewilderment. The plaque both acknowledges the incident and cements it in regional history, which pleased some and horrified others who worried about glorifying something unverified. Charles Hickson died in 2011, leaving behind a son who appears in contemporary reflections on the event. Calvin Parker sadly passed away in 2023. Ufologist Philip Mantle says he stuck to his story to the end. He often spoke about the trauma he lived with, praised his wife's support, and welcomed the historical marker as a kind of official recognition. For believers, it feels like vindication. For skeptics, it's just a town landmark with a dramatic backstory. Watching the Netflix episode and weighing the evidence is like assembling a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces were never printed. The documentary presents interviews, period footage, and contemporary reflections, but it cannot conjure the independent physical proof that would tilt the debate decisively. The presenters approach the story with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. They point out that the description of the craft and visitors bears uncanny resemblance to cinematic depictions from the era, which raises the possibility that popular culture shaped memory or expectation. They note discrepancies in Charles' definite accounts over time, and they wonder why, if a genuine government or law enforcement inquiry had taken place, there is not more public record of it. These are standard lines of inquiry for true crime and unexplained phenomena alike, and they lower the rhetorical temperature from breathless belief to measured doubt. Even so, the presenters confess a kind of hopeful bias, a shameless preference for the mysterious. This human tilt toward wonder is not purely sentimental. For many viewers, stories like Pascagoula are appealing because they challenge our sense of centrality in the universe. The idea that non-human beings might have visited and that ordinary people might have had direct contact is both terrifying and intoxicating. The presenters admit that despite the loopholes and unanswered questions, they wish the story were true. It is a small, honest admission that transforms a dispassionate review into something more conversational and human. So, where does that leave the Pascagoula incident in practical terms? It rests in that comfortable, infuriating middle ground between proven fact and delightful fiction. The case has enough consistent testimony to avoid being dismissed without thought, but not enough physical evidence to be embraced unequivocally. It has cultural resonance, a place in local history, and a narrative that will continue to be retold whenever people enjoy the tension between mundane life and the possibility that something extraordinary might interrupt it. Whether those interruptions were misinterpreted aeronautical tests, alcoholic hallucinations, skillful performances, or genuine contact with visitors from beyond our planet is a question that fuels dinner table debates and internet comment threads alike. The honest verdict from a pragmatic perspective is cautious. The story is intriguing, and the memories of the two men involved add emotional weight. However, the lack of corroboration from the bridge tenders, the absence of physical proof, and the inconsistencies cited by critics justify skepticism. At the same time, a portion of the community and of broader popular culture will never let go of the hope that one night on the Pascagoula River, something truly extraordinary occurred. The presenters of Files of the Unexplained land in that ambivalent territory, acknowledging both the compelling human testimony and the legitimate reasons to doubt. In the end, stories like Pascagoula endure because they allow us to practice two contradictory virtues at once: skepticism and wonder. We can demand evidence, call for rigor, and mock unreasonable leaps, while still offering space to marvel at what might be just beyond our understanding. Whether you fall into the camp that thinks it was an elaborate hoax, a product of stress and circumstance, or a genuine brush with non-human beings, the tale is a good one, told by men who swore to their truth and by a town that chose to remember it with a plaque. If nothing else, it reminds us that even in a modern age of surveillance and quick information, some mysteries refuse to be reduced to tweets and press releases. Now, if you enjoyed being mildly unsettled and slightly wiser for having asked the right skeptical questions, consider subscribing. Your home's poltergeist will thank you. What do you think happened that night on the Pascagoula River, and would you rather be fishing or narrating your own unexplained encounter for posterity?